All right, welcome everybody. So I'm doing something a little bit new here, called a podcast, long form, whatever you want to call it. But this is episode 1, and I am Truth Tony. And so on a regular basis, I think probably weekly initially, but we'll see how things go. I'm going to be talking about, of course, politics like I usually do, but we're also going to delve into religion, sports, culture, you name it. But today's episode will, in fact, be mostly politics. And so we're going to be diving into a few things. First, we're going to be talking about the militarization of cities. To me, this is priority number one in terms of this authoritarian takeover and where we're at. So we're going to go into detail on that. We're going to talk about this Jeffrey Epstein briefing, survivor briefing, and then press conference following, as well as the Massey Ro Khanna bill and the prospects of that passing and where we're at, and the surprising nature, I guess, if you will, of it, in that it's bipartisan. So we'll go into more detail on that. And then, of course, the Wired story, every influencer's favorite story. I've made my opinion very known on this. Not happy with these influencers, just to give you a hint, but we will, in fact, go into that as well. And then finally, we'll close this out with the NFL season, which is starting this week. I should say started tonight as I'm filming. And we'll talk about my division picks. All right, so let's start with the militarization of cities. This is, to me, just absolutely wild, because we're still arguing whether or not this is authoritarianism with some people. And we've got soldiers marching down the streets of our cities. The rest of the country didn't want to seem to pay attention when it was happening in Los Angeles, at least not beyond a week or so. But now it's happening in D.C. and on the East Coast, it seems to be waking some people up, which is par for the course, but I digress. So in terms of where we're at so far, so the Trump administration has already deployed, I should say, troops into both Los Angeles and Washington, D.C. Washington, D.C. seems to be slightly more heavy-handed, at least more visible, if you will. And I think that's just the nature of the city. It's a federally run city. Trump has a lot more leeway there. And quite honestly, Mayor Bowser has put up a pathetic fight. And so that's where we're at right now. Trump is now talking about going into other cities. He's been talking about Chicago for some time, Baltimore as well. But he recently switched things up a little bit, and now he's talking about New Orleans, Louisiana being the possibility of the next target. And so here's a clip of the president talking about what he's going to do next.
I could do that with Chicago. We could do that with New York. We could do it with Los Angeles. So we're making a determination now. Do we go to Chicago, or do we go to a place like New Orleans, where we have a great governor, Jeff Landry, who wants us to come in and straighten out a very nice section of this country that's become quite tough, quite bad. So we're going to be going to maybe Louisiana, and you have New Orleans, which has a crime problem. We'll straighten that out in about 2 weeks. It'll take us 2 weeks, easier than D.C., but we could straighten out Chicago. All they have to do is ask us.
Now, the switch to New Orleans is a little bit strange. I don't know if it will hold, but I suspect that it might be because there's a more friendly governor there in terms of inviting the federal government to help fight crime. It also could be the fact that Governor Pritzker and Mayor Johnson are fighting hard on this, to the point where we're talking about no cooperation at all with local law enforcement, which is how it should be. But, given the process of implementing Project 2025, I should say, this sort of 3 steps forward, 1 step backward, he could be feeling out the situation to see how hard he can push it at this point. Eventually, he will go into Chicago, but we'll see when. Him and his advisors are obviously openly talking about a nationwide military presence in inner cities, and possibly eventually using the Insurrection Act if he has to. He said he's thinking about it before. He hasn't yet. As with everything else, I would expect him to at some point, because that's just where we are, par for the course these days. So If you listen carefully to his speeches, he wants a standing military force embedded in every American city as local law enforcement, at least within local law enforcement. He wants a federalized police force. He wants to strip away city control, local control. Federalism for Trump is an absolute thing of the past, which was a central tenet of conservatism. Some still say it is, but it doesn't seem to be. And so this is where we're at. If you normalize this behavior, and that's what this is, that again, the 3 steps forward, 1 step back. This is all about normalizing this behavior. And if you do, you can use troops for anything. You can use them for protests, for strikes, for political rallies, you name it, to come after us. We'll see where he goes with this, but it's not good. History is our guide, whether it's Mustache Man, Pinochet in Chile, or Viktor Orban in Hungary. Consolidating power in this way is how they do it. They used the, fear and the threat of personal safety to take all of your freedoms. And that's exactly what's happening right now. Now, there is some good news out of Los Angeles. A federal judge just ruled that Trump did, in fact, violate the law by sending the National Guard into Los Angeles without prior authorization first. Unfortunately, it only applies to Los Angeles and not nationwide, and I really don't have any faith that the Supreme Court's going to uphold much of anything. So we'll see where it goes, but it could at least be a domino effect for some federal judges nationwide. So, you take the wins when you get them. But all in all, this is the real deal, guys. This is not a distraction. It's the plan, and it's not going to stop. As I've said before, matching energy is not putting up some gerrymandering fight. Matching energy is actual physical, sometimes, action from these state governors, and of course nonviolent resistance from them and from the rest of us. It's not cooperation like you saw with Gavin Newsom and ICE. Now the story that seems to be getting everybody in trouble, including the people that weren't even involved and just decided to talk about it. And that is this Wired Course story. So for those not familiar, here's the short version. Major Democratic dark money groups are funding through a fund called the 630 Fund, are funding pro-democratic influencers through a program called Course. At least that's what this article is about. And I'm sure there's other things out there, but that's where we are with this. So Chorus, through this fund, or I should say this fund is funding Course, and they have been paying influencers to push pro-democratic party narratives on TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, and you name it. These influencers did not disclose that they were being paid in this manner to their audience, and so it just looks like organic content. But behind the scenes, it's of course coordinated messaging by wealthy donors. These influencers will tell you that they weren't paid to say anything or to not say anything, but it is simply the fact of who they chose and what they normally talk about. So number one, it's manipulation, because people go to influencers and creators because they seem authentic and independent. It's relatable. We're talking to each other. And so when you pay people under the table and you don't know about it, it ruins trust and it makes all of us look bad. Number two, it's unaccountable. So if a campaign pays for ads, for instance, there's rules about disclosures. Even in normal advertising, there's rules about announcing whether or not it's paid advertising. You see it on TikTok. Platforms have their own rules for it, right? This is paying influencers where there's no transparency whatsoever. It's propaganda disguised as opinion. And three, it drowns out grassroots voices. Those of us who are on here not getting paid that much, but doing this because we believe in it, we're getting drowned out by these paid influencers. And so people aren't seeing our message as much. I have taken this admittedly pretty far, and I have blocked anyone that was part of this program. And, some people have gotten upset at me for it. I know Hawk, for instance, has been talking about this and taking a lot of heat. You're seeing these influencers dish out all kinds of crazy defenses. Now David Pakman is threatening some kind of lawsuit. I doubt he'll follow through with it. I don't know how you do it. There's nothing factually incorrect about the article. But it's that reaction that really pissed me and others off so much, right? There's no I'm sorry I did this. I should have announced it. I didn't think it was important for this, and that reason. I would have listened to that. At least listened. But no, that's not what we got. We got insults. We got blue MAGA all over our comment sections. You know, it's not okay. So unfollow these people, block these people. Aaron Parnas, David Packman, Brian Tyler Cohen. They're all just arms of the Democratic Party. So I've had enough. Of course, creators should get paid more. Nobody is arguing that. Not in this way, though. Now let's talk about the Epstein survivors briefing and press conference. This was a briefing that was planned for some time, and so I don't think anybody really expected as much to come of it as has come of it. But, you know, it's maybe a smell of hope, but, you know, we'll see. Anyway, a group of survivors that Jeffrey Epstein abused or trafficked or had abused, you name it, briefed members of Congress about their experiences. And afterwards, they stood with lawmakers in a press conference. And
I was horrified when I found out not only had Ghislaine Maxwell been transferred to what's called a low security. It's really is like a holiday camp. And then afterwards, I got a notification from the Department of Justice telling me that this was going to happen when it had already happened.
After this briefing, lawmakers were visibly upset. In fact, Nancy Mace was seen sobbing coming out of the meeting, talking about how triggering this was. And so, you know, in the press conference, we had Representative Ro Khanna and Thomas Massie, of course, because they are the ones that wrote the Epstein Files Transparency Act to compel the Justice Department, FBI, and other agencies to release all the unclassified Epstein-related records. But you also saw them joined by the likes of Marjorie Taylor Greene. Both of them, Massie and Marjorie Taylor Greene, have said that they will support these survivors in any way they can. In fact, the survivors, because nothing's being released, have said that they're going to start compiling their own list. And Marjorie Taylor Greene and Massie have both said that they will read that on the House floor. But on the flip side of that, Trump has doubled down, and he said that any vote in favor of this bill will be considered a hostile act. And so, you know, normally this is Trump, this is what MAGA does, and it's probably the case here too. They probably won't find the votes to be able to pass this thing. But it's interesting. Marjorie Taylor Greene, as horrible as she can be, is very interesting because I do believe she's actually principled. Her principles are largely crazy, but she does have them, and she doesn't seem to veer from them very easily. And so this is something to watch. It might actually be a smidgen of hope. But of course, we've thought that before, and it hasn't been the case. But let's watch this space. You know, Trump is on the list. We all want it released. Keep the pressure on this. You know, I think this is one of those things where both sides of the left, if you will, would agree that we need to have this damn thing released. All right, now let's close off with the NFL season opening. Exciting times. Now, truth be told, yes, I am a Raiders fan, as you can see. Football is not my number one sport. I'm more of a baseball, basketball kind of guy, but I do love some Sunday NFL. So here are my picks to win the divisions, all of the divisions this year. I promise I'm not going to be a homer and biased towards my Raiders, although I do like what I'm seeing this year from Pete Carroll. It doesn't hurt that I'm also a USC fan, so we'll see. But anyway, so AFC East, I've got who I think everybody has, and that's the Bills. Josh Allen is absolutely dominant. Now, the Dolphins are interesting, but they've got a lot of problems this offseason, I should say, this season, not least of which is a terrible offensive line. And so no defensive backs. You know, I like the team. I like Tua, but there's a lot of issues there. I think the Bills will take it. In the AFC West, I do look for the Broncos as well as my Raiders to do better this year, but I just can't dethrone the Chiefs just yet. I do think Patrick Mahomes has a little left in the tank, so I'm picking the Chiefs there as much as it hurts. AFC North, I like the Ravens again. Lamar Jackson is a stud. We'll see if they can do something in the playoffs finally, but that defense is incredibly underrated. AFC South, I've got the Texans with C.J. Stroud, who I wish my Raiders would have drafted, but I digress. They've obviously built a very young, athletic, hungry roster, so I like them. NFC East, I've got to pick the Eagles again. They were just so incredibly dominant last year. I don't see that letting up that much. NFC West, this one might be a little bit of a shocker. I've got the Seahawks over the Rams. It's a bit of a gamble, but I don't think the division is great. I don't think that the Rams will stay healthy all year, and so I've got the Seahawks taking that one. The NFC North, I've got the Lions again, Detroit. I think they might take another step back in some ways, but overall, they're still a good team. Goff is a good quarterback, and so I've got them again. And in the NFC South, for the fifth year in a row, I've got Tampa Bay winning that division. If you're asking me my Super Bowl picks, it's probably a little early yet. We'll get to those in maybe some future episodes, but that's who I got so far. So if you don't mind, give me a subscribe, give me a follow, whatever you're watching this on. I would really appreciate your support. More than anything, if you could subscribe to my Substack, you can do so for as little as $5 a month. I'd appreciate it. Thanks.